Now it's set, basically. So don't put your hands or anything underneath this. Now the reason I like this is because you don't see it, but we've actually bent this rod, bent this stick as we levered up our. That's about maybe 100 pounds there, at least. So it's gonna exponentially create force and speed on this end of the trap, which makes it so much better. So let's just, before I explain the whole trap, let's just see if we can catch this rabbit.
You sure it's not a hare?
What's going to make that rabbit go through there?
Well,
We're going to set it up on a
what's
run.
going to make it go through there is I've selected a rabbit path that they've made or I've made. It doesn't matter whether you make it or they make it. If they see it, they'll travel along it. And this tripwire is so fine that it's like a blade of grass. They don't care. Even a bird will trip that if it goes through there. So the rabbit is just going to bop along, and I'm going to have to be real careful here when I do this, because it could easily set that off. All right, so he's not feeling good.
Maybe you don't want to eat this one.
What's going to happen?
Yeah, but he's just feeding along, and he's going to come up. Basically, oh!
We almost
okay.
got two.
Never stand at the wrong end of the gun.
I'll take the bigger one.
Now,
Right in the neck,
Yeah,
too, boy.
tastes
that's
good, though.
Right on the neck.
that's faster than a rabbit's reactions. When he bumps that, it comes down faster, which a deadfall doesn't. Like I had a tilted rock. They can get out of that. A squirrel or rabbit are just faster. Their reflexes are faster than that. But that's why this is speeded up, because I've actually bent this. The other thing, if you notice, I've got this end lifted up when I set this snare up, because I want it to maintain force. I don't want it to spring and then be loose where an animal could crawl away. I want the animal right there, broke back and pressed down, which if you lift on this, he's got a lot of force. A rabbit can't lift that. Go ahead, let's have a volunteer come up and just...
Especially a dead rabbit.
Yeah,
I feel like the stick's going to break.
And you're just using gravity.
yeah, this is gravity.
Is that a cedar pole?
That is a cedar pole. It doesn't have to be a cedar pole. The one I'm going to use over here is a black locust, which is a better pole. But I happen to have the cedar pole. It's dry. It's going to maintain its force. And
Can you set that again?
I can, but I want to talk about it a little bit. I like this trap because I want the animals to go underneath here. So I've already got a built-in fence on this side, the way this trap is built. And it's really simple. You just get some kind of a block. I like to put a notch in it so that my trap doesn't bounce away. And then you put two cross pieces, like a funnel, and then lay a few sticks across it, and then put whatever rocks you need to get the bend. You don't want to be too much weight where you're actually, breaking that pole. But you want to be able, as you're levering it up, feel the pole bend a little bit as you're levering it up, and it speeds up the trap tremendously. And this is my, I had trouble with deadfalls; they're just too slow. So this is my way to speed this up, and I like it. The other thing we're going to do a little more fencing on the other trap. But
Now, is this trap for things other than rabbits?
yes, you basically can catch anything that goes underneath this thing, and you don't have to leave it set all the time. You can let this trail be here, but you do want to fence a lot, and I'm big on fencing. I'm forcing animals to do what I want them to do. Okay, I don't mind forcing them to do it because you can't just count on them doing it. They'll take the path of least resistance, So I've caught animals where I built the entire fence, scraped the path where there wasn't any, but when they come along, they'll see that scraped bare ground and they'll go for it because it looks like that's where everybody else is going. So you can heavily fence. It's kind of like flint knapping. A lot of people will tell you, well, let the rock tell you what to do. The rock wants to become a round ball. That's what the rock wants. You want to make the rock sharp and thin, and it doesn't want to do that. You have to force it to be that way. So this is the same thing. The animal doesn't want to get caught. It wants to wander around aimlessly and enjoy it. So I don't mind doing really heavy fencing, and we'll do some on the other trap. So this is a good practical trap. You can leave it unset and then get some more animals traveling by, and then put it back up and they'll just walk down that same trail. And this trigger, I want everybody to try to find those two little pieces, not these pieces, but the two little pieces that flew off. Yeah, there's one. There should be another one like this.
No, but here's a piece of your cord.
See it? Yeah, okay. So a lot of deadfalls use something called a shear trigger. Okay, they rely on the edge of just the edge of a piece of wood to be their trigger to go off. But that, in my experience, does one of two things. It either crushes the edge and goes off by itself, or it takes a set and a squirrel or a rabbit can dance on it and it doesn't go off. So I wanted to develop a trigger that would work in all kinds of conditions, and it had two characteristics. It was stable and sensitive. And the way I did it, and you always find your tripwire here. The way I did it is, this actually becomes what I call a double lever. So because this first lever is here, it's pushing a little bit of weight against this trigger. And then I've got a second lever where these things are held together just by this little loop. See this little loop right here? You guys can see that? That's actually easy to make. I teach a class on how to make this little loop in my cordage class. So it's just a matter of 4 steps and you weave a little loop. That's the best system I've found for making this pull evenly off the trigger. So you make that loop, then you bring it together, and then you bring it into one fine, looks like less than a blade of grass. Yeah. So any animal is used to busting through grass and weeds. It's not going to give this any thought at all. That's not going to stop a fox or even a rabbit's not going to think. Even a bird. I catch birds in these snare traps, tripping them with just a wire or just a tripwire like that.
You call this a snare trap?
No, this is the deadfall here, but I use this trigger in a snare trap too, and in a couple others. This is a very versatile trigger. Okay, so my goal was I wanted a useful, stable, sensitive trigger that was available anywhere within 200 yards on the temperate ground. That means not the Arctic Circle, but anywhere where it's temperate, where trees grow and grass grows. And if you look at this is what's called an opposite growth tree. There are about 4 of those that are very common: a maple, ashes, dogwoods, and one other one. Viburnum has them. So all you need to do is just go along when you find an ash leaf maple, which is one of my favorites, and just snap off a bunch of these ends of limbs that have lateral opposite limbs. Cut them down, strip the green bark off of them and let them dry, and then I always sand these edges. But you can make up a bunch of these triggers, and what you do is you just wind the thing up, and you don't want to be making this trigger while you're trying to set the trap or anything. You basically want to make up these components ahead of time. So you put it in your pack, you sit there at night and you make up a bunch of these triggers, okay? You put them in your pack. Now you've got a really nice, sensitive, stable trigger. Well, I've had this in freezing cold weather with snow on the ground and wind and rain, and it will not affect that little tripwire because it's not enough surface there for snow to catch on or wind to catch on or rain to catch on. I guess if we had a hurricane it might affect it, but barring a tornado or a hurricane, it's very stable. So this trap can sit there waiting to go off. That's sensitive for days and days, and having things be effective for days is your goal here, because anybody can go in a nice 72-degree temperature, pull down a limb, and an hour later catch something. It's when it's 12 degrees, 2 a.m., things are, frozen cold. I still want it to go off, sensitive, and maintain its power. And we'll talk about that with the spring pole. So you've got this component, and then this is the other component. This is a 2-stick. If you look at this was very easy for me to set by myself. If anybody's ever tried to set a figure 4 trap, oh, it's really, especially when you've got a lot of weight on it. But this actually is pretty stable. You just basically can set it there. As long as you control this end of it, it'll sit there. You don't have to try to balance a shear and all to set it. So in order to make this, what you need to do is you need to go into the deep woods where there's some white oak. This is white oak, or you could use other wood, but white oak splits very easily. So you find yourself about a 18-inch long white oak tree that's a sapling growing straight up in dark woods, and you cut out about 18-inch sections, and then you just make 2 cuts. Basically, you cut off this, and you cut halfway down into this, and then you split them apart, and you got your 2-stick deadfall. Cut this one at about a 45, and this one you just cut halfway down, and then go down here and split this off, and you got your 2-stick deadfall triggers. Okay, so you've got your trigger, you got your thing, and these components can vary, but you want to make this be a dry. You don't want to use a green. You can use a green sapling, but it's not going to be as effective. Just cut yourself a nice 10 foot, 15. So you've drug your sticks here, put some weight on it, you've tested it. You want it to lift but still bend, just like that. And you take, I've dropped, here it is. All right, so you've got your components, you've got your stand, and you've got your trigger. The other component here is just any dry stick that you split it. You want to split it like this, because when you're trying to secure the other end of this tripwire, you don't want to be trying to tie it. You can't do that as sensitive as you need it. You need to just bring it to the edge and then loop it over and you're done. So start off with you undo your trigger. Get it prepared. Yeah, just split it to wherever you need it. Things split pretty easily. All right, so I'm gonna lift that up, get the weight on it.
It's better when it's dry as opposed to green.
All right, so you want to kind of feel that the balance is right there. See, I'm controlling it just with that one spot. And this will really smart your arm if that slips off of there. Okay? Don't ask me how I know that. But yeah, you want to be somewhat careful, but sometimes stuff happens. So this is pretty easy. You just bring your two ends around, and if you get this balanced right, it's self-supporting, just like that. Okay? That's a pretty easy set for a powerful deadfall that's lifting about 100 pounds. If you've ever tried to do a figure 4, you can fiddle with those for hours trying to get all those angles and stuff set up. So at this point you're set, but you're not a hair trigger yet. So you want to bring this over and then just bring it down where it holds it resistant there. Just carefully ease that trigger down and watch it as you go down. Okay, that's going to be sensitive enough. So just to keep it from going back over, just put a little loop in it just like that. And then we don't have a real rabbit to put through there, or a real raccoon or whatever. But anything that's walking on a trail here is going to bump that trigger. So does everybody see how that's working now? Any questions on how the setup is?
Yeah, I just one question. Do you ever use man-made materials for the where you have portage? I mean, obviously that's traditional, but
do I ever know?
That
I actually think the natural materials work better, blend in better, and I'm really quick at making cordage. So I've got tons of extra cordage. This was just something I pulled together. The triggers I make when I'm, let's say, kayaking, I'll pick a bunch of triggers and then I'll just do them separately, so that's a component you don't want to be trying to make while you're setting your trap. But the rest, I think natural cordage works a lot better. Like paracord or something like that, it stands out really bad. So, okay, I'm gonna.
Question for you. To feed two people in woods like near your house, how many of these things would you need?
My success rate is about between 1 in 8 and 1 in 10. So if I had 10 traps out, I maybe catch one thing. So, and you need to keep moving those traps, out. So you would take a lot of traps. You would, spend some effort getting them out. But like the spring pole and like this, once you've got them out, you can rotate around and let new game move into the areas. You don't have to rebuild the whole thing. Just have it set and let it rest a little bit and then just reset it, basically. So if you were going to feed 2 people, right, you'd want at least 1 animal a person per day. So you'd need at least 20 traps functioning all the time. So think about that.
okay.
There's an investment in that, and then you're just basically running the trap line. But you don't have to be there for it to work. So it's not like hunting where hunting takes up a lot of time too. This you can hunt and do this too. So it's a good thing. If somebody wants to, I'll let somebody else want to pull the rabbit through.
Can I stand behind you?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
one of
watch
these
out
youngins.
for- You might
One of these young ones.
a little bit.
Come on,
What's that?
guys.
Fan out on the output side.
You want to do it?
Who wants to pull the rabbit? Okay, I want you to come over here. He maybe might be a little low right there, but kind of pretend like he's up on his hind legs there when you pull. You want to pull from up here, okay? Pull from up here, okay? Kind of lift him up as you pull. All right, here we go. Oh!
You got him.
You got him. Okay. He's a little upside down, but I think he's still good.
He hurt himself.
Here's a little trigger piece. Yeah.
Well, here's one.
Other one's to the left of
Is
us.
he dead?
Yeah, here's the other. Now, when I'm out trapping, I will often tie these 2 trigger pieces together to keep one from flying too far. That's another thing that I do, because they do tend to. Using that trigger to try to catch animals in a trail with a snare loop, okay? And it worked too good. The trigger was so sensitive that as the animal went through the snare, it would go off when his head was just through the snare, but his body wasn't through and it was straight up. And it would actually lift his head up, and I'd find an empty loop with little bits of white hair, fur, on the loop where I could see it rubbed against his chin and just lifted his head up. So I thought, you know what, I need a trigger that will follow the animal, allow him to fully commit, and then jerk the snare backwards to get
So
him.
it's like there's a rope tied to him and he doesn't even know, and he's like about to walk, and then you just pull him.
Exactly.
He's got it, huh?
Exactly. That's what I want. And I needed it then to be. I thought, well, I can figure that for one direction, but then I thought I need it to be bi-directional. I need it to be whether the animal's coming this way or this way. It's kind of like the light beams in what's the light cable? They actually send beams both directions. Fiber optics, yeah. They send light both directions. It doesn't matter, and that's what I wanted my trail snare to work. So I came up with a new idea of how to trigger and trap a trail that was a good trail or a man-made trail. We've kind of, this is an important aspect of this trail. This idea here where we funneled the animal down, but then you want to bear the earth right under where you want the animal to go, because that's like a signal, oh, that's the highway right there. That's how we get through. So you can make that. I don't mind just forcing it, basically, and making it. So what I came up with, the other thing I found when I was first trapping, was that you can pull down a nice spring pole tree. You can have a lot of force, and you can set your trap. But if you come back 5 days later and you spring that trap, that snare pole is just going to do this. It's not going to spring at all. It's just going to lift up like that. Now it'll eventually stand up again, but it's lost all its effectiveness. So a regular spring pole where you're pulling down a green tree and trying to...
You mean like a live tree?
Like a live tree, yeah.
Okay.
You've got a tree, you're pulling it down. Now I always cut all the branches off and leaves and stuff off of them if if it's a winter. Just cut the extra branches off. Pull it down. Yeah, it's extra drag. But even that, when it's 3 or 4 days and it's well below freezing at night and all, there's a diminishing time that you have to catch that animal, because that green tree
Loses tension.
just loses it and it gets weaker and weaker. So what I found is I noticed a lot of these dead snags that were laying in the woods, and I started pulling them down. Man, bing. That's the way to go. I'm not overstressing it. I'm just levering it down. And that was my first successful catch on the spring pole, was to lever down an old snag that had fallen and about this angle up in the tree. And it stayed for 8 days before that animal went through there, and still it lifted them right off the ground, because the energy is stored better in a dry piece of wood, and you're not overstressing it. It's more like a bow limb. So I've gone to this idea. This is black locust, which makes a good bow, and you can find these growing up, little things. Skin the bark off. They'll dry in a few, maybe a few days, a few weeks, and you've got a really good spring pole. You can take it to wherever you have a good trail that you want to trap. I dug about a 18-inch deep hole, jammed the pole in there, and then jammed a rock in. Just beat it in, a couple of them around it to stabilize it. You're good to go on this pole. Now we had this would catch up to a coyote on this particular spring pole. When we were dealing with natural cordage, which this snare is handmade stinging nettle cord.
Eagle's going over.
I caught a buzzard once.
Oh, really?
That counts.
That's an eagle.
caught it for the feathers. Yeah. So this is natural cordage. So if that animal isn't lifted off the ground, it's going to chew through this in minutes. So if you're primitive trapping, you absolutely have to lift the animal off the ground, or you'll just find a chewed off cordage. It's not like steel where they can chew on it. So let's go ahead and set this up. Now, some of this other cordage, this is expedient cordage here. This is pawpaw bark. This is what I call a tie down. Okay, so if you're going to have force going up, you need some way to secure it to the ground. Well, angled stakes are a good way. They don't pull directly up, and it's just a tie between it, and that counters the force that wants to go up. So you'll need that.
Also, the tension on the rope is in shear relative to your stake, which gives it even more strength.
I'm glad to know that. Didn't know that. It's pretty easy. It's just a loop. Again, you would want to make these up. This is like a tie down stake. I also have extenders, which I've used on here, just an extension about 12 inches, where I always found myself just 12 inches short of the loop I wanted to make. So I just carry extenders, which is a piece of cord with 2 loops on it. So I can always have loops on the end of my snares, so I can just extend it to get to the position I want to be in. So basically, this trap is triggered by the animal, and we've got a tie down here. We've got a tie up here, and this is going to be our lever. Okay. So as that sits there, you can see it takes very little pressure here to hold this against this spring. And you can adjust it a little bit, just if you want. I want to get right over the center there. That's where I'm at. So this is a little piece of cord, and if you want to look at it, there's a very faint groove in the end of this. Okay? Just a very faint groove. All right, that's just to kind of stabilize this. And this is the safety position right there while I set up my loop.
I was wondering there, how's that going to trigger?
This one's got a question over here.
What's that?
Don't kill too much animals.
Oh, I only kill the ones I need. So.
Like chickens.
Yeah, sometimes. We occasionally use a chicken. Now,
And deer.
and deer too.
And coyote. And bear.
We went out and we just got some weeds basically, and you'll want to camouflage this loop, okay? So right there is about what we would use for, let's say, a raccoon on this trail. And we also, we don't have it right here, but animals tend to put their nose down when they go under something like this, okay? And you can figure this animal is going to go through here mostly at night. So you kind of want to break up that circle look. But they're
I'm
not too
picturing Wile E. Coyote tying
What
an
you don't
anvil
want to
onto
do
it.
Is to see some obstacle and put their nose under it. All right, so we do something called a chin up, and these are sticky little seed heads and the like, and you can hang that on there just like that, so that the animal doesn't want to put its nose in there. There's also a little briar right there. Those are things you can do. You can also
Doggies are sticky.
you can also stick plenty of extra whatever you have, whatever weed you have, or thing to kind of control this and maintain your loop. Because the dew and the like will cause that loop to change. So you kind of you want to hang it in your in whatever weed material you have here. These weeds are getting a little bit brittle. But I usually make a box like this and then put some other stuff around it to kind of break up the loop. But they'll follow this trail. Put your chin up on there. And the way to trigger this is just gonna bring that out just a little bit.
Do you ever?
So I want to set this now, and I'm going to take this loop on my regular loop, and I'm just going to put it like that, and then I'm going to just in that groove, and I might have to. I sanded that groove so it wouldn't be too clingy. I might have to groove it a little more. You just want enough that it holds it, but not enough that it. Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to get what's called a snapping turtle bone saw. Can somebody hold this?
Don't let go.
Just hold that down. Right here to control it. You don't want to take the tension off it. Just control it. All right, I'm going to show you what we have here. This is a little snapping turtle bone saw here.
Which bone? Jawbone?
And we're just going to deepen that groove a little bit. Yep.
I didn't see your saw. Is that a mandible?
It's from the shell. The shell
Oh,
of the
shell.
snapping turtle will fall apart. I might have to go just a little bit more than that. I got it. Okay, so I don't want it to be hair trigger at all. I want it to be, take some force to take it off. And right now it's just too hair triggered. So I'm going to try to adjust it a little bit more. You get the idea. The idea is that you've just got enough of a groove in there to hold it. Not getting it. I took too much off. Had a nice groove there and I adjusted it too much.
Did you have any food today? You hungry? Mom said there's two of them.
Alright, I'm going to have to take it apart and do it without the stick on there because I can't get enough of the groove to get it to work. So let's just hold it up and do it where I can do it right.
Can you push down just a second? I'll like the one about there. All right, you can write it up now. Go ahead and set it since I've shown you guys. All right, now you see how that is?
It's just something that you need to get just right, because I don't want it too hard to set off, but I want it to have to be pulled a little bit to set off. And now we've got the loophole like that. I'll hang that back down. Now if you're an animal and you're running this path, you're mostly running it at night, this won't be an alarm to you having a little bit of extra, piece of cord on there. And you do want your chin ups though, to keep animals. You can also just take a regular.
Why would you
stick.
not put the loop closer to the ground?
Well, you don't want it closer to the ground because an animal's head is, for each animal, like a raccoon, you want it about 3.5 inches off the ground. That's where their head is. But you don't want them to stick their nose under it and push it up. So you want them to lift their nose up but still go through it about that height. So you can also stick in something like this. They'll go through that, but they won't want to put their nose down on there. But just any light thing that they don't want to hit with their nose will work. So right there, the trap is set. Now the good thing about this trap is that it will follow this animal. It'll swing. You see how it swings? I don't want to undo it, but it basically will follow the animal till it gets to about here, and then it'll start to close up. And as soon as that animal starts to feel something, its first initial reaction is to just bust through. So it's going to jerk it a little bit. So there's no good way for me to demonstrate this other than just put my hand in there and move it a little bit, because we don't have a real animal. Although when I was practicing and perfecting this, I would use my dog Scooby and a light thing and throw like a treat on the other side of the trail to see how the trap worked. That didn't hurt him. It didn't lift him up. He was probably 40 pounds or something. And I wasn't using the heavy ones, but I wanted to watch the trap work. And so we'd get him on the other side and call him, "Hey, Scooby, come here," and let him run the trail and trap him a little bit.
Does he have
Usually
trust
we'd go,
issues?
Yeah.
Obviously
he
not.
didn't
I mean,
know
if you did
that
it
I
more than
set the
once.
trap.
He didn't know you got him
He
out.
was grateful when I came and got him out.
Right.
But that's basically how it works. So we're gonna assume that an animal has come through here. All you really need to do is get that animal to put its head through this spot. And to do that, you may have to bring in a lot of fencing, because you have a little bit of obstruction there. And you always want to have that be the path of least resistance. So you might have to go get multiflora rows, and you might have to get sticks, pound in sticks here, and then weave the stickers through them. Yeah, just weave it through. That's how I fence it. Fence it both sides.
How far out might you go?
Maybe 5-10 feet. They'll see this as a trail, and they'll say, "Oh well, everybody else gets through this way, But you don't want it to be easy to go around. You want it to be. So what happens here is they go through, and this starts to catch, and then it'll slip down and then, bam, they'll pull a couple times, and it releases, and you got it.
Oh.
Now this right here, even at this stage, I wouldn't try to catch anything over a fox with this trap. It's, you want to lift it off the ground. So we had somebody, a little boy, hang on this before. He was 50 pounds, and he almost could lift him off the ground. So that's, that would lift probably a coyote.
Is that animal thrashing around right now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Ultimately going to suffocate?
yes. Yes.
Slow wave.
Unless you get
It will thrash around and it'll get tighter and tighter until it suffocates.
If you had more tension, would it break its neck?
Probably not.
Or
Not
launch
with
it.
this. It's going to be
The trigger shoot.
jolt, but it's not that violent. But you get their feet off the ground and they can't get back up to chew on this. So they'll eventually suffocate.
violent if you added a death laser.
It would be. That would be the best trap ever.
Is a death laser?
Just like step on the wrong leaf and a death laser fires.
How do you get your hands on one of those?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how do you not?